Welcome to the Into AI Safety podcast, where we document my shift to a career in AI safety. This show aims to serve as a mentorship proxy for those getting into the field, and a mentorship amplifier for our guests and myself. As always, I am your host, Jacob Haynes. During the podcast, you may hear this sound, which denotes that I have included at least one link related to the content that preceded the sound. The purpose of this is to allow for citations and providing resources without breaking the flow of conversations. As per usual, items mentioned during asides will have links in the show notes as well. So, as part of my project for AI Safety Camp, I was connected with Dr. Peter Park, a man whose very name invokes a need to say, "I need pictures of Spider-Man." Dr. Park is one of 3 co-founders of StakeOut.AI, a nonprofit with the goal of making the research, development, deployment, and adoption of AI go well for humans. This sounds like a pretty noble goal, and as you will see throughout this interview, they had already made substantial contributions towards these ideas. But unfortunately, they had to dissolve the nonprofit because they weren't receiving enough funding. So, just to reiterate, this is a group that had well-defined, meaningful goals, which had demonstrated their efficacy in multiple different ways, and was trying to secure funding that would allow them to continue their work. This was a group that strongly advocated for victims of the AI race that had already had their power suppressed, like the artists whose work was used to train the very systems that are attempting to replace them. This was a group that wanted to share the truth of the situation with everyone, and a group that I, at least, would have liked to exist, but no grantor would fund their efforts. Even though the nonprofit has been dissolved, the founders are continuing to help society within their respective areas of expertise. As a final note on that, one of the founders is now in a position that requires them to have their name and photo removed from all previous advocacy efforts. As a result, their name will be bleeped during this episode. Now, although this is a disappointing development, I am very excited to share this interview. We get into a lot of different issues, including AI art, transhumanism, the drama around the OpenAI board that happened a couple months ago, deepfakes, and a lot more. Dr. Park and I happened to be at the same place at the beginning of February, so this will actually be the podcast's first interview where both parties are in the same room. We ended up talking for about 3 hours, but an episode that long seems like a bit much, so this interview will be split up into multiple episodes. In this first one, Peter and I discuss his background and what he sees as the accomplishments that StakeOut.AI has contributed towards since it started less than a year ago. With that, I'll let Dr. Park introduce himself.
My name is Dr. Peter S. Park. You can call me Dr. Park. My pronouns are he, him, his, the he series.
Cool.
To introduce myself, I'm an MIT AI Existential Safety postdoctoral fellow working closely with Professor Max Tegmark, who is one of Time's 100 most influential people in AI. I'm also the co-founder and director of StakeOut.AI, which is an AI safety nonprofit with the goal of informing the public about the threat that advanced AI poses to their livelihoods, including their economic jobs, with the ultimate goal of using partnerships and media-based awareness campaigns to help raise a grassroots movement to demand national and international coordination on making sure AI goes well with humans, because I think it needs a lot of prescient thinking, and it's not just going to happen magically by itself.
Gotcha. Okay, so then, just to make sure, I'm understanding.
Yeah.
How do you define, the existential risk part? Because you said I work in AI safety.
Right.
What does that mean to you?
So, I think when you're dealing with super intelligent AI, which is what a number of AI companies are trying to create. OpenAI literally has a mission of creating highly autonomous systems that outperform humans at most economically valuable work. That's a literal quote from its charter. It's their definition of what is called artificial general intelligence. The reason it's called artificial general intelligence is because such an autonomous AI system that can outperform humans at most economically valuable work would outperform humans cognitively generally rather than in just a specific domain. When I did my PhD at Harvard, although my degree was in math, my dissertation was in the evolution of human cognition. That's actually where most of my research hours have been spent, although I am increasingly spending more hours on the very urgent issue of AI cognition in addition to human cognition. And as a human cognitive scientist, you have to wear many hats, many different disciplines, many different hats. So let's consider wearing the hat of an evolutionary biologist.
Okay.
What happens when you have two species, one of which is generally better than another species?
The one that's worse goes away.
Yeah, that's probably the best guess.
Yeah.
So that is, I think, how I envision it happening on the big picture. So then a lot of critics would then, at this point say, hey, do you have any specific scenarios? And to that, I would, the most important answer to that question, I think, is if it's way smarter than you, there's so many different ways it can outcompete and replace you. And because it's, hypothetically, if it's super intelligent, then the list is going to be so long that any specific scenario that you think of is likely not going to be actually what's going to happen. If you can conceptualize it, then the super intelligent AI who is, probably, if their goal is to replace you, then they're not going to use a plan that you can conceptualize. They're going to use a plan that you just never saw coming. So that's the general, I guess, principled answer. But some threat vectors that I'm personally more worried about than others, I think social manipulation by superintelligent AI of human society, things like social influence campaigns run by companies or AI controlled companies, if they ever happen, or things like election interference. Just social influence campaigns can be very, very. Our vulnerability to them is quite high, higher than what most people think.
Right.
And I think it's very possible that a super intelligent AI would be able to exploit that vulnerability to a degree that is historically unprecedented. We can't, we don't know, of course, we don't know for sure until it happens or it doesn't happen. But if I have to bet, I think that's going to be a very, very major threat vector that is going to be amplified if companies like OpenAI, Anthropic, Google DeepMind, and Meta succeed in creating AGI, artificial general, an autonomous AI system that can outperform humans at most economically relevant capabilities, which, again, wearing my evolutionary biologist hat as a human cognitive scientist, that's the red flag. That's a red flag, and on the red flag is successor species.
Right.
The sapiens to the Neanderthals, or the sapiens to the woolly mammoths, so on. Yeah.
Let's talk about the start of StakeOut.AI then.
Yes.
How did it get started? What was the reason behind it? How did you guys choose to do it?
If there was a start to StakeOut.AI, it was when I bought the website domain StakeOut.AI when I was visiting my family.
Okay.
So at that point, basically, I knew what needed to be done for AI to go well for humans, which is right now, I truly believe that most people, if they learned all the relevant information about AI, how fast and reckless the race to build more and more powerful AI is, if people just knew that information, I think they'll make the right call. They'll call for new policies, new laws, new regulations that are designed to make sure that training and deployment of these AI systems are going to be safe, and they're going to be certified as safe by experts who do not have financial or other conflicts of interest. So this is just basic nonprofit stuff, right? And it's to me it was surprising that it was the idea that there are conflicts of interest, and there are we should not trust these companies doing something very high risk, potentially very high negative externalities, economic activity, and allow them to self-regulate themselves, and that's just never going to work. And so because of these thoughts, StakeOut.AI was an idea for a nonprofit designed to inform people about all of the relevant information of what's going on in the AI race.
Mm-hmm.
I keep saying it's an idea because the point when it went from being an idea to an actual nonprofit that executes was when I onboarded my co-founders.
Okay.
First, Harry Luck, who is a 14-plus year data marketing expert.
Okay.
So internet-based data marketing, which
Right.
is a big part of our strategy.
It's a big part of everything now.
It's a big
right?
part of everything now. If you're not doing it, you're probably not doing something optimally. Even if you're, whether you're a nonprofit or a for-profit company.
Right.
I'm extremely fortunate to have Harry as a co-founder, and I'm also extremely fortunate to have as our co-founder. Is Harvard Law School graduate, DC's worker site civil rights lawyer,
Mm-hmm.
who also is a U.S. veteran who served in the U.S. Air Force as a cyber intelligence analyst. So
Okay.
very, very lucky to have co-founders with diverse but necessary skills that complement all of our skills. And that, I think, the co-founders really made StakeOut.AI go from just an idea, and I do think it's a very good idea, but even a good idea without execution is just an idea. And
Right.
now, since then, we've achieved a number of really great milestones from helping AI go well for humans that we're very proud of. Let me just list 5 of them. The first one is that we researched a scorecard that evaluated and compared existing AI governance proposals. So this
Okay.
is where we literally had a binary scoring method for several categories of what a good AI governance proposal would look like. Things
Mm-hmm.
like, are there quantitative risk bounds?
Mm-hmm.
Is there a liability for the companies creating these AIs? Is the burden of proof on the creators, the developers of the AI system? So there are these important criteria, and for each of those criteria that we thought would be important for meaningful AI governance proposal with teeth to have, we rank them as yes, the governance proposal has it, or no, the governance proposal doesn't have it.
Gotcha.
And this scorecard was researched by StakeOut.AI, and it was presented as part of the Future of Life Institute, which is another nonprofit. It's a nonprofit that the president of which is my postdoctoral mentor, Max Tegmark, and Professor Max Tegmark did present our scorecard, and along with it, the overarching document of the Future of Life Institute's own AI governance proposal. And this was presented by Max at the inaugural World International AI Safety Summit in the UK, which you probably know about.
Yes.
This is a very big deal, very emotional for a lot of people who've been working on AI safety for so long, that we have our first real progress towards meaningful intergovernmental coordination towards safe AI, which was amazing. And so that's the first...
Before we go on from that, I wanted to say, how did you choose what those categories were?
That's a good question. I think we had a lot of crowdsourcing from volunteers, and what are good categories that you think a good AI governance proposal should have. Another way we obtained or isolated the criteria that could be scored meaningfully and differentiating the governance proposals meaningfully was we compared what we intuitively thought were strong, meaningful governance proposals and weak, almost self-regulatory governance proposals to completely self-regulatory proposals. And people have an intuition for why, these ones are good and these ones are toothless. And then we tried to figure out what are the missing pieces here among the weak ones that the strong ones had that made us intuitively think these are strong. And we kind of listed those.
And then by doing that, you can bring those ideas, those more concrete ideas, to all of them. And then you can really look at like which ones have all of the good strategies and which ones look like they are good at first, but then don't necessarily have
exactly. Yeah. So I think having concrete criteria is important for overcoming cognitive biases, because if you have concrete criteria where you can score whether the governance proposal has it or not, then it's a decent way of making sure your brain doesn't fool you, your cognitive bias brain doesn't fool you. So I think the scorecard, which I want to give full credit to Max for the idea. The idea is Max's. We researched it, of course, but yeah.
Yeah, when I saw it online, because I looked at, I went to StakeOut.AI, I had already been there, but I looked at it again to see like if there's any updates, and the scorecard is super useful, just for like understanding what is even being proposed in these, because for someone who hates legalese, and I've had to deal with a little bit of it with like patents and healthcare law related things, and it's just horrible. I hate it so much. And so it's so nice to not have to read that to understand what the proposal is actually saying. And of course you don't get everything, but you get most of it, and that really helps like understand what's going on.
Thank you so much for your kind words on the scorecard, which again, the idea is Max's, and it's a truly, truly brilliant idea, and that's everything you said is why it worked so well. I think as you said, when it's all in text legalese, it reading it's like drudge work, right? And then you have an opportunity to miss, like, does this actually have liability, or does it actually require quantitative risk bounds? And I think what helped us during the research process was we had a lot of really great volunteer-led trial and error red teaming process. So it's what we did was the scorecard wasn't just presented first draft at the summit. We actually presented it publicly in a number of places, including the events preceding the UK AI Safety Summit, also on Twitter at one point, and by getting smart, altruistic, well-meaning eyeballs on it, and they're just like, wait a second, Pause AI. So do you know about the grassroots activist movement, Pause AI?
Yes. So they're the group that just says stop everything.
So pause and stop are synonyms here, where it's like an indefinite pause or an indefinite stop until there is very high quality guarantees that it'll be safe.
Okay. Yeah.
Anyway, we can discuss Pause AI in a bit, but I have the pause symbol on my Twitter bio, so I'm very sympathetic, obviously. But anyway, the reason I say is I think somebody from Pause AI said, I don't think Pause AI's governance proposal is accurately reflected in the row of like check marks and X's, the yeses and nos in the scoring because of XYZ. And then we corrected that. So we had a red teaming process, and it's because we had very well-informed volunteers, some of which were in the actual organizations and efforts that proposed the governance proposals in the first place. They would help us almost hill climb towards the more correct illustration of the true comparison between the governance proposals. So that was really helpful, and I think that was how we got from the legalese to a very crisp, very summarizing scorecard. And it was not, I would say, straightforward or fast or easy. There was hill climbing involved.
Right. Absolutely.
Yeah.
Okay. So what about the next? I think you were.
Oh yeah. So I was going to talk about 5 milestones. The second milestone we achieved for making AI go well for humans was that we raised awareness when we collaborated with Hollywood actor and SAG-AFTRA member Heather Ashley Boyer to host a Zoom webinar to inform Hollywood actors. And in this webinar, we at StakeOut.AI gave educational materials, informative Zoom webinar presentation to the actors attending the webinar, and there were a lot of actors attending, very fortunately. And in addition to us giving informative educational materials, there was also voice actor Melissa Medina, who also has, she also had a tech background in addition to her voice acting career. So she was in a position, we're very fortunate to co-speak at the webinar. So that was the second milestone where we informed the actors about the threat that advanced AI poses to their industry.
In context of the strike.
Yes.
Just where is that in the timeline?
So that's a very, very good question. And this was right before the contract vote.
This was right before the contract.
So there was a tentative agreement, right? And the SAG-AFTRA members then have the option of voting yes or voting no, or not voting, of course. And this was a little bit before the vote. Yes.
And then that vote happened, and they said
they passed it.
They did pass it.
Yes.
Okay, gotcha.
Yes. So this was designed to give as accurate information as we can provide to the SAG-AFTRA members.
Right.
We were, not motivated to selectively choose information to push in either direction.
Right.
That was very important, because if we start doing that, then our credibility as the educational information providers could get lowered. So that was a very deliberate choice we made before the event. That we're here in a spirit to inform and educate.
Right. That makes sense. Okay, cool. Awesome.
Yeah, so that's the second milestone we achieved. The third milestone we achieved for making AI go well for humans was we contributed to multiple AI law formulation processes through submissions that we made to the U.S. federal offices on Regulations.gov. So this is a very good opportunity, just FYI, especially now. The U.S. federal offices are, generally speaking, having an increased awareness and increased care of reading what various organizations and even just various individuals' opinions are about what kinds of new laws and policies we need for AI, since the AI landscape is changing so fast. I think this is a great opportunity for anyone really to see if they can have their voice heard by the U.S. federal offices. Anyway, StakeOut.AI is trying to make our voices heard, and we submitted comments to the U.S. Copyright Office, USCO, and the Office of Management Budget, OMB, and more recently the National Institute of Standards and Technology. So that's a third milestone we achieved, is get StakeOut.AI's voice in the conversation for how the government should, how the U.S. government should move to shape the AI technological race and AI technological growth, which I think is very, very important to be prescient and well informed on that matter.
Right, okay, that makes sense.
The fourth milestone we achieved for making AI go well for humans was that we worked tirelessly behind the scenes to gather signatures and raise awareness for various open letters, proposals, and petitions designed to make their voices heard to decision makers. For example, StakeOut.AI helped out on Tolga Bilge's AI Treaty Open Letter. This is an open letter where organized by Tolga, who's just a student. So I'm just an individual, but I still want to make my voice heard. And so he did the truly amazing step of organizing this open letter calling for an international AI treaty with real meaningful regulations, real meaningful real meaningful steps beyond just self-regulation of these AI companies.
Mm-hmm.
And he got a lot of signatures, and he actually got a lot of really, really important signatures, like Yashov and Geos, I believe.
Mm-hmm.
So that was a really, I would say, spontaneous, but a very great achievement by Tolga, and we at StakeOut.AI are proud to have helped him behind the scenes for this open letter. In addition to the open letter, Tolga also wrote a report on a treaty framework that, again, he took the lead in drafting. This is a student, just an individual, and he thought maybe even I can like draft a treaty proposal that I think can make a difference in helping humanity survive this AI race. This report is called the Treaty on Artificial Intelligence Safety and Cooperation, or TIES report, which the publicization of which, again, StakeOut.AI helped behind the scenes. So just this is kind of like we're playing the role of like, if you need help of this type in publicizing something, we'll help you behind the scenes to make sure it can get the most eyeballs on it and the most signatures on it, and have a decent chance at being looked at by
as many people
as possible, and especially the people at the UK AI Safety Summit, people doing the EU AI Act trilogue negotiations, which very, very good news today is that the EU AI Act is
passed, right?
Unanimous approval. Yeah, the literal text is now rock solid, airtight, and it has been unanimously passed. So that has been a multi-year effort, a roller coaster. As you probably know, there was a last-minute effort to sync the most important parts of the EU AI Act, the literal foundation model requirements. So if you're regulating AI and you're not regulating the foundation models like the GPT-4s of the world, then what's even the point?
Especially since the idea of foundation models has gotten into legislation at this point, it's probably worth addressing this jargony term. The core idea is that there are some models which are used as the foundation for further models. Fundamentally, this process is based on the idea of fine-tuning, which is when you take a pre-trained model and then run the training process an additional time using task-specific data. One might ask, what are the important differences between a fine-tuned model and a foundation model, though? Based on my understanding, there are two important distinctions. One, compute and data requirements for training a foundation model are orders of magnitude larger than those needed for fine-tuning. And two, foundation models are used as a base for the fine-tuned variants. I wanted to look into a meaningful comparison of fine-tuning costs and foundation model training costs, but it was actually incredibly difficult to get up-to-date information on this. Perhaps in the future, I'll revisit this idea. I suppose that the important part is that it is estimated that the training cost alone for foundation models is currently around 10 million, while the fine-tuning process for professional-grade models, such as Alpaca, can cost as little as $100.
So they maybe they would have gotten away with it. They almost got away with this, perhaps. But fortunately, a lot of individuals like Tolga, a lot of nonprofits without conflicts of interest were able to rally very quickly and coordinate very well to make sure that this fast one was not successfully pulled.
No, absolutely. It's crazy how much like some companies have the influence and capability to lobby for exactly what they want in the policy.
Yeah, and I think the gall of it is that my first thought is how they think they could get away with it, and I think maybe they would have gotten away with it if we were a bit slower in our response, or we were a bit maybe we made a little bit less optimal choices in terms of advocacy, but fortunately, I don't think they got away with it, or maybe they pulled the requirements a little more towards the weaker side by pulling that fast one. But I think the overall result, although not perfect, is still a great win. It's a very, very pioneering effort in intergovernmental cooperation in reining in the profit motive in the AI industry, which I think is very important. So,
right.
Yeah, very.
I guess as someone who doesn't know a ton about like exactly what was trying to be shifted, I guess like what was the argument of like why they wanted to change it, and what exactly were they trying to change? Was it just reducing or like modifying what classifies a quote unquote frontier model?
I think they were targeting more just the very idea that the foundation models should have requirements on them in the EU AI Act. I think it was a more principles thing where, so I don't want to put words in the mouths of the people involved in trying to pull this maneuver last minute. They gave some public statements. They might have also given some private statements. So I don't want to speculate on like what the true reason is, but I think I would say one description of this that I think is like pretty fair is like, oh yeah, the argument was that instead of putting the requirements and the regulations on the foundation models, which are like the engines, we should regulate the downstream users of the foundation models because of reasons XYZ. And I'm sure there are ways to make reasons XYZ sound very principled, but let's be real. This was just trying to weaken the regulation, because the main strength of the regulation and the main benefits of the regulation for people in society are on the foundation models, and the users they don't really have great options in terms of like if they are obligated to satisfy conditions XYZ, making sure it's safe, but then a lot of those situations they can't do it because they need to know what's in the foundation models and what are the process, like how is it trained, like what are the, like has it been red teamed in these ways, and if they don't know, then they can't do anything about it. So it's kind of like realistically, it was just a way of just weakening the whole thing, and from a fairness perspective, making the burden on smaller companies downstream that are using the foundation models rather than the big tech companies that are making the foundation models and providing them as like the centerpiece of these use cases.
Buckle up, team, this one's a doozy. To get the full picture, we travel back to April of 2021 when the European Commission proposed the first EU regulatory framework for AI. Since then, there were many meetings and steps taken towards defining a version that garnered enough support within the European Parliament. According to Euractiv, there seemed to be consensus as the so-called trilogue held in October of 2023 concluded. However, during a technical meeting about 2 weeks later, a coalition of Germany, France, and Italy pushed back against the tiered approach that they had previously agreed on. Jascha Bareis, a German political scientist who wrote a great piece titled Big Tech's Efforts to Derail the AI Act, states that the US tech industry, along with up-and-coming companies from the European Union, Mistral from France and Aleph Alpha in Germany, have poured massive amounts of money into lobbying in the EU. If lobbying alone was not enough to get you going, let me hit you with a couple more details regarding what I would describe as a conflict of interest. First, the one that received less press attention. Euractiv reported that Germany's Aleph Alpha has, quote, very high-level connections with the German establishment, end quote. Second is the case of Cedric O, who was France's Secretary of State in charge of digital from 2019 to 2020, and Secretary of State in charge of digital transition and electronic communications from 2020 to 2022. During his time in the French government, Cedric was known to be a proponent for strict regulations, but since he joined up with Mistral as a co-founding advisor, he has been against the EU AI Act, even saying explicitly that it would kill Mistral. Based on my reading of a tweet by Cedric in which he demonstrates a truly remarkable level of unprofessionalism, Cedric is claiming that his current stance against the so-called overregulation in the EU AI Act does not contradict his previous thoughts on regulation. My recollection was that, at the time of these statements, the EU AI Act was actually weaker than it had been during his tenure in the French government. Your active articles seem to corroborate this idea, making Cedric's stance quite confusing.
Gotcha. Okay, cool. And then I think there's one more.
There's one more, and this is one of the milestones we're most proud of. We spoke out in the New York Times against effective accelerationists, or EAC, AI industry leaders, who believe, quote, humanity should roll over and let the robots overtake us, unquote.
Okay.
So have you heard about effective accelerationism, or EAC?
Yes.
So they are based, ideologically, they are based on Nick Land's accelerationism, which is the idea that a techno-libertarian capitalist loop will make it so that eventually technology will escape human control, and it'll just escape our control. So
that's what they want.
That's what. So you can say, do they say it's inevitable, or do they say that's what we want? I think both are true. They say it's inevitable, and they probably also want it. These are the people who are like partying and just like, yeah, let's make loads of money and then reinvest it into more GPUs so that we can scale the AIs more, and we keep doing this party until a digital successor species is created, and at that point, we have transcended. We have humanity gets replaced, but our digital descendants have replaced us can colonize the galaxies. So this is effective accelerationism, and I think there's such a stark difference between how this is viewed in the AI industry and how this is viewed by almost everyone else in society.
Okay. Yeah. Yeah, I remember reading. I was doing some research, and there was a group in London that was a think tank, and they basically were looking at open source, which is a question, the topic that I want to get to at some point for sure. But they brought together a bunch of people, and they polled them. They asked them, what their thoughts on open source were, and there were a couple things that there was consensus on. One of them was there is theoretically a point at which we should regulate models. The models would be too powerful to fully open source. And everyone agreed with that, except for the EACC people. And they even had like an aside, not an aside, but just like a point that they mentioned in the paper that was like, basically, most people understand that you need to have trade-offs in anything.
Yes.
And everyone gets that, except for EACC.
I think that's almost the core of why this, let's call it what it is, which is a death cult. It's a death cult inspired by replacing humanity with AI. First economic replacement, and then even species replacement. What are the engines behind the most influential, most popular cults? I think a very strong commonality between the most popular and the most dangerous cults is this idea that there is no trade-offs, as you said. Like, just do what makes you feel good, do what makes you money, and it also happens to be the right thing to do. Or also, yes, and that idea, if unchallenged, can really propagate and really and this EAC, which was at first it was founded by anonymous Twitter accounts. You would laugh at them when they started, like Beth Jesus and Bayes Lord. But since then it has, the cult has grown to encapsulate Mark Andreessen, who is literally the co-founder and general partner at the very influential, very well-moneyed VC firm Andreessen Horowitz. Gotcha. You have Gary Tan, who is the CEO of the most powerful tech startup incubator, Y Combinator. These people have millions or billions of dollars personally and also through their companies. and they are now part of this ideology. And I think it's just very, very unfortunate that we're in this situation where they truly believe that there are no trade-offs, that the thing that makes them money, the thing that makes them feel good and makes them feel like heroes, is also the thing that's good for society, which is inspired by replacing humanity with AI. And they truly believe this, and I think that is a dangerous, unaccountable situation that, if left unchecked, if governments don't provide the guardrails and the new laws and the policies to make sure these people don't achieve their goal, then I think the worst case scenario could be quite, quite bad.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, it's I guess I just don't like the idea that there aren't any trade-offs, and like no, any regulation is bad regardless of what it is.
That is,
yeah, it doesn't make sense to me. Like,
completely agree.
Yeah. Okay, so one thing, so there's a paper that you I've read before. I've seen it sort of brought up, but it's like the divide and conquer dynamics.
Yes.
So where was that in the during the process of StakeOut.AI? Was that before? Was that after? Was that one of the catalysts?
So StakeOut.AI as an idea was started in the summer of 2023, which was right before I started my postdoc with Max. Although Max and I had talked prior to that summer, and we had started brainstorming for our research project when I formally started the postdoc at MIT under Max. So I was thinking about all these things, and there were some elements that were in my mind during the brainstorming process. The one element, of course, is OpenAI's mission is to create, quote, highly autonomous systems that outperform humans at most economically valuable work, unquote. Very, very dangerous mission. The safety problem, the control problem for AI remains almost entirely unsolved, according to many experts like Professor Jeffrey Hinton, who don't have conflicts of interest. Professor Jeffrey Hinton, as you know, he used to work for Google, but he left Google to voice his concerns that the very AI systems he pioneered as the most cited AI researcher of all time, Turing Award laureate, and so on, the very AI systems he pioneered, he was concerned that would become smarter than us and would be able to manipulate us. And he left Google, and in order to have no conflicts of interest in speaking out on this, among scientists without conflicts of interest, like Professor Jeffrey Hinton, there is a sense in which there is a strong agreement, not everyone of course, but there's general agreement that the AI control problem remains unsolved, and it remains almost entirely unsolved. Like, the problem is so much greater than the little progress we've made. So this is probably one of the points in my mind when I started brainstorming what kind of a first paper do I want to write with Max Techmark at the Techmark lab at MIT. The second point that was in my mind during the brainstorming process was there was a very influential idea that if we talk about the future harms and the future victims of AI, then that somehow detracts from the currently happening harms. Have you heard about this idea? I mean,
I read the paper.
You read the paper. So it's good that you hadn't heard about it before the paper, because at the time of brainstorming and writing the paper, I think it was a quite influential idea that there is this dichotomy between current harms and future harms. Right. You have to choose a side. It's almost like tribalism. Right. And this is very bad if you have increasing returns to cooperation kind of situation, right? Where more people you have that are united, the better. If that's true, then the worst thing that can happen is parts of the potential stakeholders duke it out, even when there's a shared threat outside that it's a shared threat. So that was the second element that was in my head while I brainstormed, and I was just like, this is just helping big tech. We're all humans. We care about our current well-being, and we care about our future well-being and our children's well-being. And they're all on the same chopping block. Like, what are we even doing? That informed just the idea that, like, AI-driven unemployment, AI-driven reduction in humans' economic leverage is a very, very big problem. And it's a problem that once it happens, it's very, very difficult to reverse. Because if, for example, if you're a digital artist and a Midjourney version that can draw similar aesthetic quality as you, but for way cheaper and way faster, once that hits the market, that hit can really, it's very sudden, it's very rapid, and it's way, way more difficult to reverse that from happening once it hits the market, once the government's let it through, or don't have their guard up, and so it's let through. So I think that the idea of losing economic leverage is very bad. Once it happens, it's very difficult to reverse, although not impossible. If you have help, of course, things become more possible. Help from future victims who didn't lose their leverage yet, the digital artists. They were almost sucker punched, right? They.
Well, yeah, I mean, a lot of them, as far as, like, I did a little looking into it, a lot of them felt like, art's the last thing that's going to be able to be replicated in any meaningful way. And then all of a sudden that wasn't the case. I mean, at least from a naive perspective. I think personally, like, art is more about the process.
I completely agree. I think...
But... Yeah. Still, the output, like, from a company perspective, for example, like, yeah, the output of the AI system is just as not maybe necessarily just as good aesthetically, but it gets the job done.
Gets the job done, exactly. And an important thing to mention also is that the way these replacement models are trained, these replacing AI models are trained, is they're trained on the very copyrighted hard work of the very same digital artists who are now competing and fearing obsolescence by the very models trained on their stolen data.
Right.
So that is really, really unfair. And hopefully some combination of court precedents, judicial precedents, and maybe even new laws, some combination, U.S. Copyright Office, some combination of these efforts just makes it clear that this is not okay, because it's clear. I just don't think this is a morally acceptable thing to do, right? Mm-hmm. If you're gonna create a technology that just wipes out an entire occupation, there are many, I think, as a society, there are many standards we should expect such an effort to, necessary conditions that we should expect them to achieve. They're necessary, so they're not sufficient. And one of those necessary conditions is, don't try to rapidly replace, the digital art, all of the digital artists, by rapidly scraping and stealing their data and training your models, and then rapidly putting them out of a job and just say it's inevitable. Just like, that's not sufficient. But at the very least, if this is what you did to replace the digital artist, then I just don't think we should accept that as a society. There needs to be or
we should pay them.
We should pay them
a ton of money and continue to pay them a ton of money.
Yeah.
I guess that's the other option.
There
right?
should be consent. Yes.
There should be consent, and there should be
yes.
compensation.
Exactly. And I think these companies really dropped the ball, because if they did the right thing and talking about consent and compensation before they tried to rush this through, there might have a even decent percentage of digital artists might have cooperated with them and had a win-win situation. But because they try to slam this down the throats of everyone, I talked to digital artists. Almost all of them are saying oh yeah, if we had the power, if we had the power to just choose what the laws are, or in the laws, if we can voice our true opinions and not compromise positions to
It's just stop all of it.
Just like, you have lost our trust permanently.
Right.
And, I don't blame them. Like,
I mean, it's pretty
right.
reasonable.
And I just want to say, like, there's a reason I say, like, if they were to voice their honest opinion, they would just, like, never trust it completely. And sometimes the very same people who hold these opinions, when they talk in public, when they talk to policymakers, they almost feel a need to compromise on their true beliefs by just, there's almost AI industry has successfully created this social pressure of like, oh yeah, don't be anti-technology, don't be like one of the people against the spinning jenny when the steam engine came out.
Well, that's like that's like what Luddites
exactly
originated from, right? And they were basically saying like, we don't want you to take our jobs with your new technology,
right? And
then it's been reframed into someone who is, not intelligent.
Exactly. So there's a I would say the AI industry social influence campaign capabilities are quite impressive, and they have somehow gone these artists who are just completely screwed. This is jammed down their throats, and they're like, I can never trust this AI industry again. Even if they offer me boatloads of money as compensation, I just can't trust them. I would say, like, you've lost their trust, but you have these very same people feel socially pressured into not voicing these, very valid concerns because of everything you said. And on just the replacement and obsolescence part, I think the steam engine was, in the long run, a net good for society. It helped lift, economies and people out of poverty. But I don't think AI is the steam engine. I think it's a successor species. It's the thing that weakens humanity, even, short term and in the long term. And, that's why you need, these companies feel the need to just rapidly see if they can get away with it, and it's just steal a bunch of data, scrape a bunch of data. That's the copyrighted hard work of these content creators, right?
Right.
So I don't think this comparison is actually based on truth, but the AI industry's social influence capabilities are quite impressive. So we have this very unfortunate situation, which again, StakeOut.AI, a big part of our modus operandi is just giving the confidence in people who have just been totally screwed. And if you're totally screwed, a very a very common reaction is, give up, compromise. But I do think we are the overwhelming favorite to win. Of course, if we do nothing, if we just sit at home and don't write to our representatives, don't make our voices heard, then we lose. But again, most people are on Team Human. There's a very clear divide between, are you Team Human or are you pro replacing humans with AI, either economically or as a species, with the whole there's no trade-off. Clearly, in this situation, I think most people would be Team Human as soon as they are convinced of the strength or of the severity and the imminence of the threat. That's the only missing piece.
And I am going to stop it there for now, as we next discuss what Dr. Park sees as the current efforts that contribute towards safe and ethical AI systems. We'll get to those in the next full episode, which will not be next week, but the week after that. You may have also noticed that I added a link to a Patreon and a coin drop in the show description. These are part of my efforts to make this work sustainable long term, and that, along with some other developments, is going to result in a couple changes to the show. I'll talk more about it in next week's minisode, which will discuss my thought process around these ideas and what my plans are moving forward. If you liked this episode, make sure to subscribe to the podcast so that you don't miss out on the next ones. As always, thank you so much for listening, and I'll see you next time.